I've always loved driving alone at night. The quiet of the open road, the cool air from the open windows, and the feeling of freedom, it's like nothing else. Last October, I experienced a night drive that forever changed my love for the solitude of the road. It was a Friday night, and I was driving back home from a late meeting with a client in a nearby city. The highway stretched out before me, a dark ribbon cutting through the dense forest on either side. The only light came from my car's headlights, illuminating the way ahead. I had the radio off, preferring the silence and the occasional sounds of the night. As I drove deeper into the night, I noticed that the road was unusually empty. Not a single car had passed me for miles. A sense of isolation began to creep in, but I brushed it off. It wasn't the first time I'd been alone on this road. About an hour into the drive, my car's dashboard lit up with a warning. The fuel gauge was dangerously low. I cursed under my breath, realizing I had forgotten to fill up before leaving the city. I had no choice but to find a gas station, and soon. A few miles later, I spotted an old, dilapidated gas station sign flickering in the distance. Relieved, I pulled off the highway and into the station. The place looked like it hadn't been updated in decades. The pumps were ancient, and the single, flickering light above the station cast eerie shadows. I parked next to the pump and got out of the car, the night air chilly against my skin. As I began to fill up the tank, I heard the faint sound of footsteps behind me. I turned quickly, but there was no one there. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I shook it off, blaming my imagination. As the tank filled, I walked over to the small, run-down convenience store next to the pumps. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, the store was dimly lit, with shelves sparsely stocked and a layer of dust covering everything. An old man with a weathered face and piercing blue eyes sat behind the counter, staring at me. "Evening," I said, trying to sound casual. He didn't respond, just continued to stare. Feeling increasingly uneasy, I quickly grabbed a bottle of water and some snacks, placed them on the counter, and handed over a few bills. The old man took the money without a word, his eyes never leaving mine. As I left, I could feel his gaze burning into my back. I got back into my car, eager to get back on the road. As I started the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the old man standing in the doorway of the store, still watching me. A shiver ran down my spine. Driving away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The road seemed even darker now, the trees pressing in from either side. I tried to focus on the drive, but my mind kept drifting back to the gas station and the old man's unsettling stare. About 20 minutes later, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. A car was approaching fast. Relieved to see another vehicle, I slowed down slightly to let it pass. But instead of overtaking me, the car slowed down and began to follow closely behind. My unease turned to fear. I increased my speed, hoping to lose the car, but it matched my every move. I glanced at my phone, thinking about calling for help, but there was no signal. The car behind me flashed its headlights, blinding me momentarily. Panic surged through me. I floored the accelerator, the engine roaring as I sped down the highway. The pursuing car stayed right on my tail, its lights glaring in my mirrors. Suddenly, my car began to sputter. I glanced at the dashboard in horror. The fuel gauge was back to empty. I couldn't understand it. I had just filled up. My car slowed to a crawl and finally came to a stop. Heart pounding, I locked the doors and watched as the other car pulled up behind me. The driver's door opened and a figure stepped out, slowly making their way toward me. The faint light from my car's interior illuminated their face as they got closer, and my breath caught in my throat. It was the old man from the gas station. He reached my window and tapped on the glass, his eyes still fixed on mine. I could see his lips moving, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. My mind raced, searching for a way out. Then, without warning, he stepped back and vanished into the darkness. I sat there paralyzed with fear for what felt like an eternity. When I finally gathered the courage to look around, there was no sign of the old man or his car. The road was empty once again. Desperate, I tried to start my car. To my surprise, the engine roared to life and the fuel gauge showed a full tank. I didn't question it. I just drove, pushing the car to its limits until I reached the safety of my home. To this day, I don't know what happened that night. I've tried to rationalize it, but there's no explanation that makes sense. The gas station doesn't appear on any map, and no one I've spoken to has ever seen it. I still drive alone at night, but I'm always on edge, always looking over my shoulder, haunted by the memory of that night and the old man's piercing blue eyes.